Empower You podcast is devoted to bringing real-world wisdom and encouragement to our listeners. We discuss a multitude of life principles and the process from an economic, cultural, and societal perspective. We believe that through tough conversations and shared wisdom, we can pave the path and leave a ladder for the future. Subscribe to our channel and let us empower you. Yeah, Ketu, thank you
Yes.
so much for being here. So basically, Empower You podcast has been something that's been rolling around in my head for a while. And over
Uh-huh.
the pandemic, I decided to just go for it and go ahead and create something that I think would be unique and that would speak to our people from a variety of perspectives and just layman's terms. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we often associate success with these far off notions when the reality is success lives in your mindset. If you don't have a good mindset, there's no way you can be wealthy or successful no matter how much money you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think before all the strategies and jargon that people throw at all these young people, we have to first understand how to regulate ourselves. And we need practical strategies from people who we can relate to just give game. You know, we enough of us don't have mentors and people who we look up to the way that we should, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Um, for the most part, I'm not a follower. I have never been a follower.
Right.
There were always elders in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That was just the nature of the community that I grew up in.
Right.
And um, as young folk, my objective was to avoid the scrutiny and the order that the elders wanted to impose on the community and on young folk. So
Okay.
my indoctrination was one of rebellion from the beginning, but I just living in a community where elders were respected and revered. I had to learn how to navigate my way around um, their their scrutiny and their um, parenting.
Mm,
So
yeah.
that's what I did, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And I see that that's for the most part what young people do. They try to avoid the scrutiny of the elders so that they can get away with whatever they want to get away with.
Mm.
But it's not. I don't find anything particularly wrong with that. That's just the nature of the relationship. Um, from my perspective, what's missing is the communal system of education that teaches young people who they really are, and who they are not just from a personal, egotistical, um, personality driven perspective, but from an historical perspective. Who are they? They manifest particular behavioral traits. All of us do. And those behavioral traits don't just arise from us. There's genetic coding that has brought those forth.
Right.
We are the residue of our ancestors. We carry the lineage,
Yeah. Of
the
all that
experience
pain.
of our ancestors with us. And when we reach a point in our lives where we can discern the what that is, then that's where, that's where success, as you call it,
Yeah.
that's where success begins to show up. Success, from my perspective, success has nothing to do with uh, the attainment of commercial goods or anything like that, or with professionalism. That that's just a form of slavery. I'm not
Hmm.
interested in slavery in any manifestation of it.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think I would have to agree with you there that I think our metric for success is one of possessions, which is a flawed theory. And then also, I think what you said about identity is very, very, very important. I think it's hard to really establish who you are, what you want to be, or what you want your life to look like, or find your purpose when you don't fundamentally know who you are, when you just are lost as to how and what and where and from whence you came. And I think one of the reasons I have even made this podcast is just so that people have access to the kind of conversations that we are having right
Hmm.
now, because I don't think that some of these young people just are even exposed to this. I know I wasn't really in great circles, I wouldn't say, until I was like 23, and that's, now I grew up in the church and things like that, but and so that helped me for sure, my parenting and stuff like that. However, as an adult, it really is still quite gray and confusing, and I left home at 18, and I was kind of gone way before then because of how much I was working. But um without that, I mean, there just are a lot of mistakes that you can avoid when you have good counsel, when you have access to intelligent people, when it can change the way you view yourself. It can guide you, whether it is in an aggressive or a passive way, down a path of growth and enlightenment. And having those key people or having access to those key conversations, it's just vital. And so that's why, I'm putting this together, because I think it'll be a great resource for people who are just figuring it out, who maybe didn't have great parents, who maybe are not as intellectual. So they're having issues just like figuring it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a lot. And so I just want this to be a resource that is helpful and that is clear. And one of the big things that we're talking about before, we talked about in the episode previous, we talked about maintaining a positive attitude, and we talked to two different people. And so this time we're talking about building positive relationships and what
Hmm.
that actually means. And so I just, I think you would be a great person, obviously, to speak on the human connection in this way and how to create positive relationships when some people literally just haven't ever really been around non-toxic relationships. They just haven't, like their family, they have no idea. And so how do you uh-oh.
That it's okay. That's just one of these apps that I have on here, and it's going
Okay.
to bubble up every now and then.
Okay. And so I just wanted to start off by saying, what what does it mean to build a positive relationship?
Building a positive relationship begins with yourself. You can't build a positive relationship with anyone else until you understand that you have value, and that that value may be of some use to someone else. So it really, you know, for me, community engagement, life itself, operates on a three-legged stool. It's identity, culture, and interest. And if you're talking about building relationships with people, then you're talking about your ability to be vulnerable, your ability to be accessible, your ability to be open and communicative. Um, those are skills that you learn as you walk the path of life.
Right.
Uh, there's no there's no course that I know that you can take for building personal relationships. Self-esteem is a matter of what you know about yourself in relationship to the world. How do you feel about yourself? It's difficult to talk about building a positive relationship with someone else if you don't have an attitude of self-worth, if you do not understand that you have an intrinsic value as a human being, and that value as a human being is lived on a cultural platform. And from that cultural platform and your intrinsic value as a human being, you define with your actions and your attitudes and your words what your interests are. That's the three-legged stool, but it begins with you as a young person. Okay, from the time I was old enough to deal with folks in social situations and remember it, from the time I was 4 years old till I was 21 and went to jail, I didn't have a positive self-esteem, and I didn't have positive relationships with people that would be that today, when people talk about positive relationships, that I wouldn't have showed up on the register. But the relationships that I had with the people in my community were ones that shaped and molded me and allowed me, once I got some sense, to understand who I was. But I first had to have some sense. I had to have some common sense. I had to develop some intellectual acuity, and I had to understand that I was living in a world where, and in space, in social and political space, where I was not valued and I was an outsider. I had to understand the nature of my relationship with the world that I was in and with myself. And so when I got the opportunity to sit down long enough to see who I had been,
Right. Right.
what was in front of me, um, I could then begin to fashion a path to where I wanted to go. But I couldn't do that as, I met with some young people on Saturday. Was it Saturday? Yeah, on Saturday. Uh, and all of these young people have had run-ins with the authorities. But each one of them had an engaging personality, was highly intelligent, and was doing service in the community. But that's not the perspective that the society in which we live would see those young men. So the whole thing about positive relationships, yeah, it's how are you dealing with the human being that's in front of you? How vulnerable are you? How much are you willing to talk about who you are and how you got to where you are? Not who you think you are, but who are you? What are you doing? What is your conversation? What is your degree of exposure, of human exposure? It's who are you? That's the fundamental question.
Mm. That you can't even get to building relationships unless you yourself are aware of who you are so that you can build
Exactly.
those relationships intentionally.
Exactly. And the who of who we are is not primarily determined by what we get from the outside world. That is, it has to be determined from a spiritual or an internal voice,
Right.
because the voice that's out here in the world is not going to give you, if you look like you and me, is not going to give you a positive take on your identity. That is intrinsic. It has to be fed by the people that you're talking to about. It has to be fed by the elders. It has to be fed by adults. It has to be fed by your peers who see your value. If people see and understand your value, then you have a sense of who you are. I had a sense of who I was as a young person, as a teenager, but I didn't know how to manifest that because I was too busy trying to maintain a rep.
Yeah. Yeah. That ego.
Yeah, I had to maintain a rep. The ego was about, how do I stay safe out here on this street and keep people off me? That was the identity that I had to fashion while growing up,
Hmm.
because there was always a fight to be had. And I wasn't particularly interested in fighting. So I knew I had to be the aggressor in most situations to keep from fighting.
Hmm. Wow. And you think people take this approach into their relationships,
Oh yeah,
because they don't know any better? Because they
I
don't
I
have a
definitely
why and
did.
a who?
I definitely did. I definitely did. And it took 5 years on death row for me to figure out that there was a difference between my personality, my ego, and my identity, or my soul, my spirit. I had to understand that. I had to come to a to an intellectual understanding, to an emotional understanding, to a psychological and psychic understanding, and to a spiritual understanding of what did it mean to be a human being.
Hmm.
And then, what did it mean to be an African in America? What does it mean to be a new African in America? What does it mean to look like I look in this world? What is that? What's attendant with that? At 18, 19, 20, I wasn't capable of dealing with that. I didn't understand the question. I didn't even know the paradigm existed from a political perspective.
Right. Wow.
So building positive relationships, it's all about who you are. How do you value yourself, and how do you want to be valued by other people?
Right. Because outside of that, if you don't have a good understanding of who you are, and I don't think anybody has ever fully figured out, but I do think that I'm just agreeing with you. If you don't have a fundamental idea of who you are, you're always just giving off smoke signals.
Hmm.
You're never really about it because you don't really have a grasp on who you are and what your purpose is and what, God or your creator or whatever it is you subscribe to, what role you play in anything. So you really are either waiting for them to dictate what's going on, you're either bullying your way into it, or you throwing up smoke screens.
Hmm. Fear.
Mm,
It's fear. I
fear.
mean, I was in a state of fear for most of my young life. I was afraid. Okay. And so I acted out of fear. I was going to do something to you before you did something to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, but when you have a chance to really sit down and take a look at that and see the ugly that really is, then you have a choice. Then you're in a position to make a choice. Well, I see that I'm this way, but I don't have to be. Now, am I willing to go through the pain to change this uncomfortable comfort level that I have accepted as myself.
Right. Wow. So hold on, I'm getting this together here. Man, that is what you said about fear. I think that's very interesting. I kind of want to dwell on that just a little bit. Because I think, especially as Black men, we really don't talk about our fears very much. And I think we definitely have them, but we really don't like to address them.
Why
So
is that? Why do you think that is?
I think, um, I think that because of the things that we have to endure on a daily basis, on a regular basis rather, um, we tend to try our hardest not to allow any extra scrutiny, not to
Hmm.
allow any extra doubt, not to, we're careful not to be perceived or try to not be perceived as weak or in any way defenseless because we're used to being preyed on. And
Hmm.
even though we are strong vessels as human beings, we're often killed at higher rates either by the hands of someone who looks like us or the police or in other incidents. And so I think there is a lot of fear and anxiety that exists um, in Black men that we're not allowed to share. And I don't think it's because Black women or anybody is doing it. I think it's because we are not as intentional as we are not intentionally building relationships with each other that are based off of growth, not based off of comfort or trauma, but that are based off of growth. Because I think there is a level of programming that would have us be jealous of each other. And then humans are just humans. And I think it's important that we talk about that. And it's okay, in my opinion, to be because you could think of fear negatively, or you could kind of think of it as a human response to danger. And we all can admit that we're in danger. We all can admit that our lives are repeatedly threatened and attacked, either overtly or subvertly. And so the way you process that and the things that the emotion that creates in you is fear. That doesn't mean you're weak or anything, but I mean, it's a valid response, is what I'm saying. And I think we don't give each other the leeway to have that valid response, or maybe it's crushed, or maybe people feel like their peers will not acknowledge them the way that they want to be acknowledged if they do. um I just think we as Black men have to do a much better job at bonding and um creating a safe space so that we can be transparent, and make plans. We can be transparent and create solutions. Um, and I think that's programming too, and that's not everybody. But I really do think that there's a measure of programming that has gone into that mistrust, that distrust of people like who look like you. Those are all intentional uh, um, strategies that have been used against us. And so I think there are just residue from that. I think there is a lack of acknowledgement sometimes of the emotional or mental anguish. We how can I say that? We miss some of the big picture. We got the history, we got the pictures, but as from a spiritual emotional level, we haven't fully addressed that trauma, I feel like. And go ahead.
Most of us, most of us are ignorant of the situation that we are really in
Hmm.
and the history that is being lived out, that we are living out each day. Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy,
Mm-mm.
post-traumatic slave syndrome?
No, I'm not actually.
Post-traumatic slave syndrome um, is the simple statement that over 400 years, people of African descent here have been terrorized, murdered, dismembered, and traumatized. That that treatment, those experiences live in our cells, in our DNA,
Yeah.
and they unfold in our behavioral responses to life. Post-traumatic slave syndrome, just like post-traumatic, I was in the war, and we used to call it, when I came up, it was called shell shock.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, shell shock is the reaction to an experience that I had that I keep repeating. What do you think happens to people who have been traumatized, systematically traumatized over 400 years?
They keep
And we
reliving that trauma.
But then we magnify the trauma by trying to talk it away. We cannot talk away the trauma. We have to engage the trauma, understand where it is, where it came from, and what we were doing to resist it. Our resistance to the trauma and to the devil began on the West African coast. From the time that we were grabbed, we have been in resistance. But that is not the history that we are taught. We are taught a history of fear and submission.
Hmm.
We're taught a history of dreaming and being complicit. We're taught a history of being a good boy and girl and obey the orders. That is not a history that can, or a psychology that can rid this soma, this body, of fear. The fear has to be expelled through physical, psychological, emotional engagement with the enemy. That's how you get rid of the fear. If you can't, you can go to the shrink for the next 10 years, but the shrink is not going to get rid of post-traumatic slave syndrome. No matter how much you can't talk your way out of post-traumatic slave syndrome. You have to develop an attitude that says, I am at war, understand it. I'm a peaceful being, but there's a but.
Right.
And the but is, if the trauma comes at me, I'm going to meet it and repel it. I am not going to accept it into my life, into my body, into my thought stream to become a part of me. I reject it. We have to reject what is happening to us on a daily basis. On WBOI, brother in Bloomington just talked about being whipped by some white men, held down. They was gonna put a noose around his neck and hang him.
Yep.
Now this is in Bloomington on the 4th of July.
I saw the video.
Okay, so what are we talking about when we're talking about building relationship? I ain't talking about white people. I'm talking about, what are we talking about, relationships with one another? The question with that brother, what is our response to that? Are we looking for the mayor to do something? For the police chief to do something? What is our response? What is the response that will remove the fear from our lives? The response is to hunt down the culprits. That's the appropriate response of people who respect themselves, have an identity, and are in control of their lives. You hunt down the culprits and you deal with them. You don't put it before the bar. You don't put it before the police chief or the mayor. That's the enemy. We have to stand up and be the men we say we are. America's, as Malcolm said, you can be born in a 747, but that don't make you an airplane. Okay? You may be born in America, but that don't make you an American. It don't make you a citizen. Everything in your history tells you you are not a citizen. You are a subject.
Yeah.
My choice, I choose not to be a subject.
Yeah.
And so every day is a fight. Every day
Every day.
every day is about how does the resistance that is necessary to be a human being in this place manifest? How does it manifest? Because other than that, you're dealing in fear.
Yeah.
The, the protests that just happened over the death of George Floyd, those protests were appeals to the enemy to do something about the issue, to do something about police brutality. How many times have we done that?
A lot.
Yeah. And so why are we, the question then is, why are we still doing it and talking about Black Lives Mattering? If we don't understand that Black Lives Matter and are willing to stand up for that, what is carrying a sign going to do? What I'm saying is, if you want to build a positive relationship with someone who looks like you or someone who doesn't look like you, you must first have an identity that you will stand on, which means that you come out of a culture that is a historical experience that aligns you with the truth of your situation. When you put yourself in that place, then you can talk about having some positive relationship. People will deal with you positively.
Right, right. Because, again, you've checked in and you understand what kind of, manifestations to be putting out there when you meet people. What what is your strategy? Having gone through what you've been through, which I would really enjoy for you to, tell us a little bit about yourself also. We kind of jumped right into the questions, but I think going into this next question, if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself and how at this point you have learned to build positive relationships and what your take is on that, or what your strategy, not your take, what's your strategy now that you have a clear mind and things like that. What is your strategy for it? And if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great too.
My strategy is real clear. It's just be honest and truthful and vulnerable. I don't have anything to hide. Um, I'm not afraid of anything. So I don't have any reason not to be upfront in who I am. I speak as a poet. because poetry is my most authentic voice. This is not my language. English is not my language. My language was taken from me. And so I have had to learn to communicate in these people's tongue. Hold on one second. No, bro, can't talk to you right now. Okay. I have had to learn to speak in these people's tongue, and I have mastered their frequency. I understand this society based on its frequency. Excuse me. Okay. Based on its frequency, based on how it communicates in the world. I understand white people. So I don't have no problems with white people. I understand that most Black people, as Frantz Fanon said, black skin, white mass.
Oof.
We have white people's, and let me clarify that. When I say white people, I'm talking about the system of white supremacy. We have the system of white supremacy operating in our heads, and we're thinking that it is us speaking out of our mouths. It's not us. It's what you call the programming. It's the program that has been imposed over 4 centuries.
Yeah.
That's what's doing the talking. If we do not do the exorcism that is necessary to expel the demon from our minds, then the system is always going to be speaking through us. Protesting and carrying signs is the system speaking through our mouths and bodies and desires. We want to modify the system so that it works for us.
Right.
That don't make no sense. There's nothing in history that says that that makes sense. In our history, there's nothing in our history that says that makes sense. But we're still doing it. Why? Because white folks up in our head talking. We have to learn to speak for ourselves. Prison taught me to speak for myself. My ancestors loved me enough to set me down, to give me an experience where I had to understand that I was going to choose either life or death. At 21, I was accused of a murder I did not commit. I was found guilty because I thought I was smarter than the police. So I was going to tell them whatever they wanted to know so that they would let me go to sleep. And when I woke up, we could get back on the truth and they would do the necessary investigation. Well, fools rush in where angels fear to tread.
Oof.
And so I wound up on death row. I wound up on death row because my ancestors understood that my thick head couldn't be still long enough if I had any way out. And so for 5 years, I had the opportunity to investigate me. I had the opportunity to watch the explosive 60s, the Vietnam War, all unfold before me, sitting there in a television screen. And I watched it on a daily basis. And I came to understand with the 500 to 600 books that I was reading that I was more than this attitude that I had and the ignorance that I had that had landed me in the position that I was in. And so through that exploration of self, through that study of the world and its relationships, the different people in the world and their relationships, through an understanding of different religious systems and how they all are talking about the same thing, but
Yep.
the way that they have all been diverted from their message by their messengers, I came to understand that I have value. I do not need anybody to ever speak for me. And so I was able to emerge with a voice and an identity. And over the next 54 years now, I have been developing my interests. That's the story. The story is in being faithful to oneself.
Being faithful to one's self. That is really, really, man, that makes me feel a little guilty.
Know why is that?
Well, I think because I definitely have gone through periods of my life where I literally was not faithful to myself and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And it has cost me. Generally, it cost me time. Thankfully, it hasn't cost me, my life or anything. But it has cost me sometimes a lot,
Let me
emotionally, mentally, whatever it is. And I think what you just said there, is it has to be even a part of that strategy,
let,
of
let me see if I can explain something.
okay,
We do a whole lot of thinking,
okay,
but we ain't thinking. White supremacy is thinking. We have been given a structure that we call thought. Thought does not, thought is not the cogitation that we think it is. Thought must emerge. Real thought, real thinking must emerge from the soul, from the spirit, from the identity. It is not an intellectual process. That's some white people shit. We think with our bodies. We understand that there is no disconnect between mind, body, and spirit. That's some more white people shit. We are spirits walking the earth in lesson in school to be better humans so that we can get to the next level. That's who we are. And those of us who have had this experience that we call Black are particularly gifted because all you have in the world, your wealth in the world, is your experience. You can't take nothing else with you. What you take out of this experience is your wealth. Your wealth is your experience. And when you learn how to mine your experience, then you're thinking. Not how to manipulate your experience to get a particular thing. That's strategy. Fuck strategy. We don't have to do that. All we have to do is learn how to be us, and we can walk into any room and take it, because that's the force of our ancestors. That's the force of our historical experience here. But we don't do that because it ain't approved by white folk. I don't need white people's approval, and I don't need Negroes' approval. I don't need anybody's approval because my ancestors already have approved me. That's what our children have to be taught, that their attitudes they have been given those attitudes as a way of staying healthy in the world. And what are we teaching them? We're teaching them to push those attitudes down, to put it in a box and lock it up so that you can follow the white man's law and go crazy as hell or go to prison. No, ain't nothing wrong with our children. There's something wrong with us, because we send them to these schools to be educated, and they being miseducated, and we ain't got the common sense to know that they being miseducated. We ain't teaching them at home who they are. We letting the school and the church and the prison and the courts teach them who they are. So they got to go and sit up in a jail cell to figure out who they are.
And that's if they get the premonition, if they get the epiphany there.
That's right.
If they're fortunate enough, like
that's
you
right.
were, you know what I mean? To be
That's
studying
right.
and thinking that way. And man, you're dead on.
So that's the issue. The issue is we have to learn how to have honest conversations with one another. It's not about telling you that you're wrong. It's about saying, have you considered this?
Right.
That have you considered that goal that you set may be totally disempowering you. Maybe you haven't even realized yet what your power is. This is a time, this window in time, nothing in the world that happens as a mistake. There ain't no mistakes. The universe don't make no mistakes. The only mistake, we're a mistake. Our thinking that we have made a mistake is a mistake. We ain't made no mistake. You're exactly where you're supposed to be based on the experience that you have had. The only thing you had in this world that you carry with you is your experience. Your experience is your guide. Once you come into relationship with your experience and you learn to love that experience, you can have a positive relationship with anybody in the world, because you ain't looking for nothing from them. And they can't do anything to you that you won't allow. What's the ultimate fear in this society? Death. Well, guess what? Ain't nobody come here who's ever stayed. Everybody who ever come here has left here.
Yep, they all
So
die
you're
in the
gonna
end.
die. So get over it.
Right.
Get over it. You're gonna die. So now what? How to live. The objective of life, like the Buddhists say, the objective of life is to have a good death. And a good death is on your deathbed, when you're just before you take your last breath, and that final thought comes into your head. Is it one of turmoil? Is it one of angst? Or is it one of, I can relax and let go, finally? That's the thought I want to have. Okay, done with this. See you next round.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, you said so many very, very valuable things. I think what you said about loving your experience, it enabled you to change the experiences that you were having. And
That's
you know what I mean? Because you're not fighting. You don't feel like something is attacking you. You're just going through your purpose. But you got
right.
to know that purpose. You have to identify that and know yourself first.
You can't, until you can't identify your purpose if you don't know yourself.
Right.
Purpose,
Okay.
purpose is an organic principle. It's not an intellectual projection. Purpose is organic. You are living your purpose every day. Every day. The purpose is to become a better human being, whatever that means to you. If you're engaged in that, it's going to lead you to whatever you are thinking your purpose might be. But to set a purpose out there, to set a goal and then try to reach it, that's fool's gold.
You don't think you should set goals for
Oh,
yourself?
why?
Well, I mean, even if it's just like you said, as far as my goal is to know myself better, is to intentionally spend more time in my own experience and analyzing my own organic thought, my own organic needs or movements, leanings,
Is,
desires.
is that a goal?
I think I think sometimes it is because there's so many other things you can distract yourself and do. You have to be intentional. I guess the idea behind setting a goal, at least in my head, now,
Uh-huh.
is
Right.
is the intention that my entire life is going to face this direction until I get what it is I feel like I'm missing. And I'm
Okay.
open to whatever I need to do to get there, whether that's
Okay.
emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. You are just that given that is your goal in life, just like you said, is to be able to live and be better every day so that at the end of it, you can be like, I used all of my time the way I was supposed to, genuinely, authentically. I can let it go because I don't
Okay.
have any of that. You know what I mean? So I think goal
Okay.
setting for some people is a great thing.
Understand that we are speaking in somebody else's language. So
Okay.
when you say goal setting, I say, okay, let me listen to what the brother's saying. Yeah, I can understand what you're saying because you you put the preamble of intention on goal. And intention is internal. Intention is what is happening from the core of self. It is driven by that frequency. It's driven by that energy. So whatever's set out here as the goal, it's really the intention that is unfolding.
Hmm.
And if the intention moves you halfway to the point of the goal and you see you need to avert and go in a different direction, you can do that.
Right.
But if the goal is an intellectual one and you get to the halfway point and intuition and all the signs and symbols tell you that you ought to go a different way, and you say, no, I'm going to go to the goal is problematic
Ooh,
because the goal is then just a thought that
not
you are
an
trying to
intention.
manifest. It ain't the intention no more
Ah,
because the intention is an energy. The intention is a frequency. The goal's not a frequency. The goal is a thought. There's a difference between the intention and the goal. If you stay focused on the intention, you can't go wrong because another word for intention is intuition. You're driven by a knowledge that is greater than your ability to intellectually perceive. You are receiving with your whole self and being guided on that path by your whole self, not just your intellect or your ability to reason. That's white people's way of being in the world. That's
right.
not our way of being in the world. We have to understand that the middle leg in that three-legged stool, identity, culture, interest, is culture. We have to understand when we look in the mirror, who is looking back at us? The old African is looking back at us. We have to understand Africa, where everybody comes from, where every human on the planet comes from, where we have been taught to run from. Why is that? Well, if you want to keep a people enslaved, turn them against themselves. Make them think that we are God. We are the thing that they should be trying to get to. That's what most of us is doing.
Woo.
We
Yeah.
go to these schools, we pay sick, sick money to get degrees that don't produce jobs or the income that they were set out to do. And we think that doing that has made us successful.
Hmm. Hmm. You preaching, K2. You preaching. I love that. You said stay focused on the intention, not the goal.
Yeah.
Because the intention is the manifestation of your purpose, and a goal is a manifestation of your thought.
Yes. And more than likely, if you do not understand your history, if you do not understand your history, if you do not understand the history of people of African descent here, and I'm not talking about slavery,
Right.
okay? If you do not understand that history, then more than likely, when you open your mouth, white folks talking. And so you have to
Oof.
learn to observe your own language. You have to slow down your speech so that you are hearing what you're saying, because sound resonates in this body. And when the sound is wrong, the body knows it. And when you bring that relationship together, you stop saying stuff that don't make no sense. You have to understand who we are. We are not those people. We are a different people. This melanin in us makes us a different people. We operate at a different frequency. We receive information, messages from the universe. Everybody does, but we receive them in a particular way. And when we can interpret that and
That's
not think that those sensations that arise in our body, that is something wrong with us, when we learn how to interpret that, we don't have to think. Thinking is the slowest thing that human beings do. It's the slowest thing that human beings do. Give a person a choice to do something. They may have to sit for a whole week and think about it. Why? When the information came in, they knew what to do. Their body told them what to do. But if you ain't listening, you can't hear. And so then you got to go through an intellectual process, and you have
to
to work your way through white supremacy to
to
get to the reality.
right, and that emotion that you just had,
That's right.
and that hesitation, because that comes right up after that.
That's right. See, but there's a difference between emotion. Emotion is simply energy moving through matter. That's all emotion is. It's energy moving through matter. And the law of the universe is change. We are changing, and everything in the world is changing momentarily, second by second by second, by nanosecond by nanosecond. Everything is changing. Change is the law of the universe. And when we allow ourselves to be guided by natural law and not white folks' law, we become a different people.
Hmm.
Now, you can call natural law God or anything else you want to call it. And if you're dealing with God on a sensational, not emotional, sensational level, oh, then you got a relationship that can nobody invade this space.
Listen, man, you are you are really, really saying some profound things, in my opinion. The fact that you just said that when you have a relationship with with God through the principles of purpose and intention, nobody can invade your space because you are interpreting your emotions, and I'm putting up quotation marks there, correctly. You're
You're interpreting,
interpreting the
you're
energy
interpreting
moving
your
through you.
sensation. You're interpreting your sensations, not your emotions. Sensation and emotion, different. I felt the tap on my hand. I
Right.
feel the heat in my body. Sensation. Emotion is something different. Sensation is always happening. It's always happening. It's what allows us to be in engagement with the environment and the world we live in. That's sensation. Emotion is shifting attitude about particular phenomenon that moves through matter. We're the matter that it's moving through. Our body is the matter that it's moving through. And it may start here in the brain, and it may be a fire, and it may move to our gut, and then it's a rumbling sea.
Yeah.
That's emotion.
Moving that
When you
energy.
when you understand that there's a difference between sensation and emotion, you can step outside of emotion and watch it happen, watch it change, and you can see its relationship to the outside environment.
Hmm. Wow. I think you just quelled every argument that I've ever had. I think one of the things that it's interesting you said that, because one of the things that I have been thinking about lately, because I've been really, really busy. I've been really wanting to get involved in some creative projects. Me and you have
Mhm,
talked about doing some work. And so I've just been kind of like trying to evacuate all the things that I'm doing that I don't need to be doing. And I'm trying to like
mhm,
drop as many things. I've been saying no so much to people. It is
mhm,
so amazing because I feel like I am manifesting with my intentions what my
mhm,
purpose is. And
mhm,
by saying no and by just sitting back for a second, I'm trying to engage in certain things, and I'm noticing that all these things are going on, right? Everything's on fire. But I somehow seem to be doing all right. I have
mhm,
my own struggles and stuff, but I don't have to take on the energy, the emotion
mhm,
of what is
mhm.
happening around me.
That's
I
right.
can choose to just be all right. I had an issue pop up today. I had forgot to do something. I didn't realize I needed to do it. And now I had a client who was wanting it. And so I instead of getting really flustered about it, I tried to check in and just say, you don't have to be on fire just because they are.
Mhm,
You don't
mhm.
have to respond to whatever is happening just because they are.
That's right.
That is your choice to allow all of the stress that you're having to exist in your body.
That's right.
And in the past, I've really failed at this. I feel like it's been one of my biggest failures in regards to building positive relationships, is taking on other people's fire that wasn't my own. And so now I'm tending to their fire and other people's fire, and I'm not tending to my own, which then puts me in a place where I am just riding the waves of other people's emotions.
Mhm. You said two things here. I'm trying and failure. We lead with language. We must be hyper attuned to language, to what comes out of our mouths, until we reach the place where we don't have to worry about it because we know that they speaking through you.
Right.
Okay? Trying is a word that I always encourage people to eliminate from your palette of words. To try means to fail. To try means to not do. We live in a world of duality. I try, I fail. No, you're working, you are doing. The reason why you didn't remember to do whatever it was you didn't remember to do was because you didn't need to remember to do it. If you would have needed to remember to do it, you would have did it. That's a lesson. It's not a failure. It's a lesson that says, whoop, be conscious, be conscious, be conscious, be conscious. Watch. The thought arises, failure arises, you watch it, you watch the emotion that it stirs, you watch it, it subsides, it subsides, it subsides. It might rise up again, and then you keep watching it, and it goes away. You do not try in the world, because if you're trying in the world, then you're always defeating yourself. You are doing in the world. You are manifesting in the world. You are working in the world. All of those are things that are actual. Trying is not actual. Trying is a substitute word. You don't need substitute words. Your spirit doesn't want substitute words because they don't feed you. You should never speak failure about yourself because you ain't failing. You may be learning. You may stumble in your learning, but you haven't failed. The impact of words, every word has a vibration. Feel the vibration of that word to see if you really want to use it about yourself. Every sound, words are only sounds. That's all. They're sounds that we agree have a meaning. That's what a word is. It has no more power than that, what we agree on. But at its root level, it is a sound, it is a vibration. And so pay attention to the vibration to see if you want to use it in relationship to yourself or in relationship to someone else that you're speaking to. You have the power of intellect and you have the power of spirit. They're not separate. They are one in the same. Intellect should never predominate spirit. Spirit should always guide.
Wow. That's man. So I normally have a question in here
Mm-hmm.
that talks about, what's your biggest failure? And I'm going to change that. I just deleted it and put what is your biggest learning experience?
Oh.
Because I believe when you were saying that, I just felt convicted because I do use that word a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
especially in regards to myself and my own shortcomings.
Mm-hmm.
And just by acknowledging that, you're using energy, you're speaking vibrations into yourself that are
Yeah.
not affirming. And so every time you make a move, you have to overcome what you just said about yourself.
And when you say they're not affirming, they are not God-centered. Affirmation is God-centered, because God out here, all this is God. We ain't got no control over this. We don't control the air. We don't control the sun. We don't control the water. All of that we do not know is God. But we too are part of the creation. So if God doesn't manifest in us, then we are in denial. So when we speak our particular experiential truth, it is a manifestation of the Most High. Because everything in the universe is manifest from the universe to the universe. The universe is speaking to itself. We are we are grains of sand on the beach. That's all we are. Grains of sand on the beach, stars in the universe. We are one pinprick. But we have this ego that thinks we are all that. Humble yourself. Understand that this is a learning process. And don't nobody have the answers. You can talk about science all you want, but if you check out science, it started over here, and by the time they got over here, they changed 100 times.
Because they're still trying to figure it out.
Well, they're trying to figure it out just like you are.
Right, and there's levels to all of that.
So don't make science God. And don't make what you read in a book God. If God don't exist in you, then there's a problem. What's filling that space?
Ego. Ego. Worshiping yourself.
Another word, yes. Another word for ego is demon. There's a demon loose. And so we have to quell the demons. And the demons manifest in our thoughts and our words, like failure.
Right. I just wrote down ego equals demon.
Ego equals demon.
Man. Ketu, we could sit here and talk forever. I find myself wanting to ask you so many questions that are just, I don't know, like, this is all very interesting to me because I am on my own process of activating and moving in, manifesting my intention. That's why I'm even doing this podcast. It's because I want to get this intention out. Because I think I'm here to do that. I think I'm here to stand in that space. It's just like, if you think of like a conveyor belt or an assembly line, one person's grabbing and, you're just kind of swinging back and forth, doing whatever you need to do. And I think there's links in all of those, like a link in the chain. And I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do, is be that link in the chain in whatever way that I'm supposed to. But I also am trying to make sure my ego is detached enough to understand just what you said about nobody has the answers. You just have to let that intention guide you further into your purpose. And so I grew up real, religious, and everything had to be just so. Everything had to be right. It's all that conservatism. that we
Mm-hmm.
learned from slavery and from oppression that we then teach to our kids. And I don't think discipline is slavery, but I do think that some of the ideals and the things we teach our kids about themselves can be mental bondage.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that kind of stuff can very easily exist in the church. And so I've struggled with that. Not that the people in the church have put something on me, just that the environment that I was in was not feeding my soul the way I felt like it should. And I had my own things and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, long story short, I just think it is really like I've been taking notes this whole time, and I've got so many good ones. Emotion equals energy moving through matter. That is so deep because I've always told my brother he's emotional, right? And he gets so upset with me when I say that. But when you describe this is the first thing I think of, that and then my own stuff. It's literally the energy you feel when you feel disrespected or you feel hurt or just coming manifesting its way out of your body, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because you're not managing that sensation. You haven't identified it and been like, okay, this is making me angry, but why is it making me angry? How am I to navigate through you're a slave to that energy because
Mm-hmm.
you haven't, because you don't, maybe because you don't have a fundamental idea of your own identity, and so you have nothing to attach your behaviors to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just free, which could be obviously problematic. And I just think it's just incredible, all the stuff that you're saying. It is. I'm just sitting here taking notes, man. I'm telling you, I got pages full of notes just that you've been sitting here talking.
You in your conversation, I've noticed it in this conversation, and also in meetings with Podag. Podag. You say I think a lot.
Uh-huh.
What is the difference between I think and I know?
Um, I guess there I did it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I don't want to assume that my experience is the most experience in the room and
Okay.
that I only speak from my own experience. And that is why I try to be very conscious to make statements for myself, not
Let,
for anybody else. You know
let,
what I mean?
let me stop you right there. The only person that you can ever speak for is yourself. You can't speak for nobody else because you ain't living nobody else's life.
Right.
So you can relieve yourself of that thought burden. You can't speak for nobody else. So whoever told you that that was a possibility, they was misleading you. There's the difference between thinking and knowing. Thinking is an intellectual projection. I think is a way of saying I doubt myself. You don't want to do that. I know means I am speaking from my experience, lived. I have lived it. I know it. You can say anything you want, but you can't change my experience with my experience. So I am speaking from a base of knowledge. I don't think. It is not about thinking. It's about knowing. Life is not a thought. Life is not thinking. Life is doing. Life is experiencing. That's life. That's the process. Thinking is a distraction from life. Thinking doesn't get it life. Thinking gets it controlling people. That's what
Yeah.
we've been taught here. We've been taught that thinking is a control mechanism. We can't manifest the best of ourselves through our thinking. There's a level of intellectualization that allows you to transcend the political, but very few people reach that, because you have to know so much about yourself and about the subject matter that you're talking about that you can do that. There's a few people in the world who can do that. The rest of us have to come from our experience if we want to be authentic. And it's not about, I think this thing. No, I'm doing this thing, and this is my experience. So I know. If you do a thought, do a thought experiment on yourself. Write down, carry a notepad with you, and every time you say I think, make a mark on the paper. Every time you say I know, make a mark on the paper. See the difference. How does I think make me feel? How do I feel when I think, as opposed to when I know?
Wow. I am writing this down. I think this episode.
Just did it again.
What?
You said I think.
This episode
Mm-hmm.
is for me. And so I'm not sure, and I really don't care how anybody else feels about it. You have really, really given me a lot to
Consider. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
about how I go about my own, relationship with myself. You said it earlier, being true to yourself, being faithful to yourself.
You can't be faithful to yourself if you're thinking.
That's right.
Because you're being complicit with somebody else's thought.
The thought exercise that you gave just
Mm-hmm.
now about writing down how many times I say think
Mm-hmm.
versus how
As
many
opposed to no.
times I say I know.
Right. Right. See, and what that exercise will do is make you more aware of what you're saying. It will slow down the process of cogitation so that you can align yourself with the energy, with the frequency of your own intention. Because for so many people, their intentional frequency and their verbal frequency don't match. They ain't the same. The intention is pure. The verbal expression is diluted, not diluted, diluted. It's lost intensity because we want to be seen in a certain way. We want to fit a certain paradigm. We want to impress in a certain way. That's where the ego enters. Getting rid of the ego, getting rid of the thought process and getting to the intention, the most beneficial and the most enlightening experience I've had in the world, and they happen on a daily basis, but overall has been the process of parenting. Nothing has affected me like the process of parenting, because I had to so carefully watch myself in relationship to another human being who, from the perspective of size, from the perspective of experience, was not at the level that I was. And so I had to be attentive to that little person to give them what they needed. And what they needed wasn't anything that could be bought or sold. What they needed was to know that whatever it is they were feeling was legitimate, was supported, and that whatever struggle they had is what they were supposed to be going through. Don't run away from it, run dead into it. Embrace it so that you can know yourself in that moment. Teaching young people that was the benefit of my came from the benefit of my going to prison and having the time to sit in the silence and watch myself.
Wow, man. Oh my goodness. That is a brilliant thought exercise. Um, I feel like, no, I know I have so much farther to go. And I also know that I am profoundly capable of it.
Mm-hmm. See, and when you just spoke that, it resonated in my body. I felt it.
I did too.
Okay. But if you would have said, I think, I wouldn't have felt that. There's a difference. When you speak out of your experience, the ancestors can speak through you. And you will learn to discern their voices or their voice as they manifest. All the experiences that the people in your bloodline have had all the way back to the progenitor exists in you. And you have the ability to tap it because of this melanin. Okay, I got to call him back. There's 3 people I got to call back.
Well, we can wrap up in just a few minutes here if you want.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
because
I got
it's been
8 o'clock.
about, yep. Yeah. Oh man. Thank you so much, K2. What
It's
a
my pleasure.
blessing. What
It's,
a blessing.
it's absolutely my pleasure. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good. Oh
And
man.
I benefited from it as much as did you. What Ivan Van Sertima, brilliant, brilliant academic scholar, um, wrote They Came Before Columbus. They said about teaching was that the student was really the teacher, that the students were really teaching the teacher. And that's the nature of the relationship that I'm always looking for. I'm always looking for, what is the person that I'm talking to, what are they telling me that I need to know? Because all I can ever really talk about is my experience. I don't know nothing else. And I'm not in the, I don't have time to, at 75, I don't have time to speculate.
That's right.
I'm not speculating. I'm talking this is what I know. Well, how do you know that? Because I have lived it and experienced it. Well, how do you know it's right? Because I've lived it and experienced it. Well, are you sure about that? I think you need to go talk to somebody else.
Right.
You need to stop talking to me, because I said it to you twice. I ain't got time for that. I ain't got time for your doubt about yourself, because you're not doubting me, you doubting yourself. So when you want to talk to me, then you come on back, we can talk.
Yep.
You enjoyed it, brother.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to put this all together and send it to you and
All
get
right.
your thoughts on it.
Okay.
For sure. Well, I'll let you go. Thank you again. And I'll be in touch with you real soon.
Okay, man. I look
Real
forward
soon.
to it.
All right now. Be good.
All right. You take care.
Bye. EmpowerYou podcast is devoted to bringing real world wisdom and encouragement to our listeners. We discuss a multitude of life principles and the process from an economic, cultural, and societal perspective. We believe that through tough conversations and shared wisdom, we can pave the path and leave a ladder for the future. Subscribe to our channel and let us empower you.